US-China trade war reflects the current economic order. China's growing economic power is transitioning the country into the number one spot in the global economy.
But how has China managed to have such a great and impactful economic growth?
The biggest reason that it had a big reserve of underutilized labor force. About half of the people moved to the cities, industries, and that created a huge economic growth. Recently, investment and technological progress has become more important.
For me, I think the most important is we have our own machine at the very beginning, so we can improve very easy. People say us that Chinese is very good at copying. So we have our foundation, we have our own machine. But when we know something good, we can make it. We can improve ourselves. So this is why, this is a good reason that we can develop very quick. At that time, we imported, but gradually we can produce. And then we occupied all the market of the world.
Lo que China ha hecho es aprovechar que muchos países lo están utilizando para las manufacturas. Digo, Estados Unidos no es el único.
The economic growth of China has also allowed its population to have higher saving rates.
Eso ha permitido pues que la gente tenga un poco más de poder de compra, ¿no? Que también hace que se vuelva un mercado atractivo para muchos países y que como el gobierno está controlando quién entra, quién no a ese país, pues pueden conseguir muchas ventajas porque, claro, el tamaño del mercado es enorme, ¿no? Entonces, muchos han cedido ahí cosas que no ceden en otros países para poder entrar al mercado.
So I would say that the U.S. dominance has been very beneficial to China's growth in the decades between the late 70s to maybe even like around the time of the global financial crisis. Part of the U.S. thinking was that it would try to integrate China into its global system, into its capital markets, and into its consumer market. The hope there was to get China to grow, to get it to its interest to conform more with general or neoliberal capital kinds of thinking.
They've been able to reconcile their own political beliefs along with a majority of the principles of capitalism. They're now the little beehive of the global economy, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to stoke that growth.
So that was certainly very helpful for growth, right? Of course, this creates other issues for inequality, but it was good for growth. But that led to a relative, not an absolute, but a relative decline of the U.S. You can say that China's coming up very fast. The U.S. is not growing that fast, so it looks like China's catching up.
How do you think China's growth has affected the U.S. economy?
I have to say that it's not the Chinese want to do. It's not what we intend to do it. Maybe this example that we make everything cheaper. Americans or the Europeans, they can very hard to earn money. We just want to, every Chinese can afford, can buy, can afford this cost.
But in reality, is China really to blame for the fall of the U.S. economic power?
So I think that America is solely responsible for the position that we're in, politically and economically. What I call the disintermediation of the middle class, meaning back in the 90s, we shipped a lot of jobs offshore that would have been nice American middle class jobs. We're spending 5 or 6 borrowed dollars. Okay. And the U.S. deficit is at its highest point. When the Reagan administration began, the United States was the largest creditor nation in the world, meaning we lent the most money to other countries.
Yes,
by the end of his 8 years, we were the largest debtor nation, and we have held that position since then. You know who owns one of the biggest chunks of that debt? China. We have also killed off what had been one of the bright spots in the United States, which is public education.
Okay.
We were principally a agricultural and manufacturing based economy.
Yes.
If you look at it today, we are a service sector based economy, which, by the way, is heavily dependent on intellectual skills, which we do a very bad job laying the foundation for those skills to be developed. Then last but not least, it's our whole political system. What we have seen is, particularly in the last 4 or 8 years, is there has become the hyper-partisanship. So now it's all, you're either with me or you're against me. There's no way to engage in respectful discourse. The leader of the free world.
And in 2020, with the coronavirus pandemic, it's important to see how each country has dealt with the consequences of this health issue that has become economical, social, and political.
O sea, Estados Unidos está como en naranja, muy rojo, casi rojo, y los chinos ya están en amarillo clarito. Para ellos la pandemia fue así como, hay un pequeño tropezón y la economía sigue subiendo y estos están a punto de meterse en una gran depresión otra vez. Entonces, lo que sí es clarísimo es que China va para arriba y los americanos ahorita están estancados y vamos a ver cuánto más duran ahí y qué pasa después.
Who in the end do you think is the one that is benefiting the least from this trade war?
I think nobody can benefit from the trade war. At least I'm always listening from the media and the government that the Chinese developing is also benefit for the US and for all the world. Chinese benefit from the good products, imported one, and then we can have our own products, very good, modernized, and also we can afford it and enjoy it. And for other countries, for the like US people, they can enjoy the products from China with a low price, with good quality and a low price. That's benefit for all the people.
And in reality, is there any real winners in a trade war? Can either country win or lose? Or is the only loser the people that live in those countries?
With trade wars, basically it's a negative sum situation. No one wins. It's who loses more.
Es que se están pegando entre los dos, porque los chinos, a ver, Estados Unidos te ponían aranceles y todo el mundo temblaba y no sé qué, hasta que todo el mundo descubrió, dijo, pues yo también te la puedo regresar y ahí te va y te la pongo de esta manera. El golpe es estratégico. Es que es una competencia por la supremacía, entonces, y los chinos no están dispuestos a ceder y los americanos, pues tampoco, pero sí tienen que hacer una adaptación de que, oye, pues ya no eres esa superpotencia de los años 60.
And with the US election bringing a new president, is there anything that can really change in the short term for the US and China relations?
It's going to take us a long time to recover the damage that Trump has done.
Hopefully with the new president or whatever happens in these elections, there will probably be a change also with the dynamic between the two countries.
We don't think that has any difference.
The reality is that Chinese are very confident in their growing power, and no matter who their next target is, they're ready to continue to fight to maintain their growing economic power.
We just know that US will do some destroy it, but we don't know which one is the next. And okay, no problem, we are ready. And actually, no big influence for us.
Do you think that there's anything that the US can do to stop China's momentum, or is it too late or out of their hands?
No, nada.
I don't think the U.S. can stop China's momentum. It's not something that the U.S. can do. It has to work with the China challenge.
If you ask if there's a way, I think there should be a way of stopping China. The worst thought is to have a war. If I exclude those extraordinary measures, unpeaceful measures, then no, I don't think so.
I think they have in US they have a capability to destroy everything, but they have to think over it's benefit for them or not. I think if they want to have a real war, maybe we have to stop.
The reality is that maybe the US can't do anything to stop China, but China can stop itself.
Now, what will stop China's momentum is its demographics and also its environment. They're trying to clean up the environment part. It's not because they're tremendously altruistic. It's because I think they realize that having problems with water supply really affects your industry. As China is going through the phase that many middle-income countries have gone through, which is they have declining birth rates. The fact that China's sex ratio is really imbalanced is a problem too. They have far more men than they have women.
I don't think that the political economic situation, in particular the political situation, is moving towards a good direction. It's more and more becoming kind of dictatorship, and the freedom of speech and democracy, all these things are in decay in China. So anyway, Chinese economic power will someday, I think within 10 years, will exceed that of the US.
Another interesting point is understanding who China is working with, which in many cases is developing countries that don't have many relations with the US.
I don't think that China intentionally selected those countries which were ostracized by the US or European Union. I think China had an impulse of expanding its exports and foreign investment to all countries.
Developed countries in many cases are harder to penetrate, and this is where China found developing countries as a great ally.
While the emerging countries, it is more easier to penetrate because there are not so many established companies, not so many established powers, and I think it is a coincidence that there were some countries that has been sanctioned or even blocked by the US or by the European Union.
How has the trade war affected the relations of China with the rest of the Asia-Pacific region?
Some countries that actually benefited a lot from the trade war. What the trade war has done is to accelerate divestment from China. As China developed, costs were increasing, right? Part of the problem was also that China has a very good infrastructure for business and has a skilled labor force. So to replicate that has been harder. But with the trade war, I think they looked harder for alternatives. So places that had a reasonable labor cost and also a reasonably skilled labor force benefited. So you see places like Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, they are benefiting from the movement of American, Japanese, and South Korean businesses out from China.
I think China should commit itself more on the long-term economic welfare of its partners, and I think the construction of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank is a good move by China towards such commitment to the development of other developing countries.
So countries that get Chinese investment, yes, there is short-term, medium-term growth, but there whether that growth is sustainable or not, I think is the bigger question. Whether that growth is equitable for the societies or not is also in question, because the sticker thing with the Belt and Road is, if you look at a lot of the local pushback with Belt and Road projects, for instance, that we've seen in Thailand, that we've seen in Indonesia, these have to do with local governance and distribution kinds of issues. So if you build an infrastructure project, you're building a road, you're building a railway line, and then factories along the side, you have to take the land from somewhere, and you have to take the land from someone. And so issues of how that compensation is worked out has become a problem, which is why you see both in Indonesia and Thailand, the rail projects have been going on so slowly. When you look at the benefits that come, those benefits may not trickle down to the local population, creating sort of a more unequal situation that gets you a lot of local resentment.
This trade war has emphasized the fight for economic superiority between two world powers. However, it's important to remember that regardless of who the hegemon is, its interest should be in the people's welfare. Knowing that the relations between developing and developed countries can perpetuate a dependency that can create vicious cycles and negatively impact people's dignity of life, countries such as China and the US should focus their influence on long-term economic welfare, making it possible for populations to reap such benefits and improve their dignity of life.